General Hospital spoilers tease that the biggest shock of Joe's life is no longer a mysterious secret, his true identity has finally been confirmed. And the revelation sends shockwaves not only through his heart but also across the entire Port Charles community. Things were already complicated enough when Gio discovered he was the biological child of Brooke Lynn and Dante, a baby secretly given away 20 years ago, but now the turmoil intensifies with the sudden arrival of Camilla, the woman Gio loves and reveres as his real mother, in Port Charles. Camilla doesn't appear as a side character or someone meant to close a chapter from the past, instead. She becomes a central figure, shaking the fragile emotional and identity transformation Gio is struggling with. Her presence is like a sharp blade slicing through the already turbulent flow of truth. While Brooke Lynn is slowly opening her heart to step into the role of a mother, trying to connect with the son she lost, and while Dante still can't fully grasp that he has a grown child. Camilla's sudden reappearance throws all attempts at bonding into a state of limbo, fragile and on the brink of collapse. Gio no longer knows where to find safe harbor in the storm of his emotions. Camilla isn't just the woman who raised him with love and patience for 2 decades, she symbolizes stability, memory, childhood, and a sacred bond he believed was irreplaceable. Accepting Brooke Lynn and Dante as his biological parents was never easy, and now, with Camilla standing in front of him in the flesh, everything becomes even more complicated. Not only are his emotions torn apart, but a flood of legal, inheritance, and identity issues are now beginning to erupt like a silent earthquake. Gio is suddenly at the center of an unspoken conflict, where matters of inheritance, his place in the Quartermain family, familial responsibility from the falconry side, and loyalty to the Cerullos start to clash openly and violently. He is no longer just a young violinist in Port Charles, he is now a key piece tied to 3 legacy families, each with their own expectations, demands, and invisible pressures weighing heavily on him. Brooke Lynn, full of regret and a yearning to make amends, wants to be a real mother, something she lost from the very beginning. But she must also confront the painful truth that motherhood cannot be restored by mere biological facts. Gio loves Camilla with a love that can't be measured, and in his heart, she is still his mother, regardless of DNA or legal papers. Brooke Lynn's hope of winning back her son after losing him at birth is now a treacherous journey, with the very truth dimming any possibility of emotional connection. Camilla, for her part, hasn't come to Port Charles empty-handed. She brings with her a past, a story, reasons, and perhaps undisclosed secrets. Her decision to adopt Gio, her connection to the Cerullo family, and the way she protected him throughout his life all give her a position that cannot be brushed aside. If Brooke Lynn brought Gio into this world, Camilla built that world for him. And now she returns not to claim, but to assert that 2 decades of nurturing love cannot be erased by a drop of shared blood. Meanwhile, Dante finds himself caught in the middle, a man who once longed for a family, who was scarred by loss, now suddenly thrust into the role of a father to a grown man. Gio doesn't need to be taught how to walk, talk, or live, he needs to be respected in his understanding and choices. That makes it difficult for Dante to simply follow his paternal instinct and embrace Gio. Gio may carry his blood, but becoming a father is now a long, painful journey filled with challenges. The question now is, what path will Gio choose? Will he return to Brooke Lynn and call her Mom after 2 decades apart? Will he accept Dante as his father and open his heart to build a new relationship from the ashes of the past? Or will he continue to see Camilla as the only one he considers true family? Joe's decision will not only impact his own emotions but could alter the dynamics of the 3 deeply intertwined families in dangerous and unpredictable ways. Amid this chaos, adjustments around Joe's rights, identity, and social standing are exploding in ways no one can control. A young man once known as a student, a musician, a Cerullo family friend is now a potential Quartermain heir, the son of a respected cop like Dante Falconeri, and the nexus of some of the most complex relationships in Port Charles. Those who once stood outside Joe's story are now forced into its whirlwind, where love, power, and reputation are all being tested, and could be destroyed at any moment. If Gio lacks the strength to hold on to his sense of self amid this storm, he could lose everything, including himself. Ultimately, Camilla is forced to reveal the entire truth about Joe's identity, a bombshell that shakes Port Charles to its core. Not only disrupting the young man's life but triggering a ripple effect of irreversible consequences. When the truth is laid bare, Camilla no longer hides behind a veil of false peace. She tells Gio bluntly that he is not her biological son, but a child handed to her under mysterious circumstances nearly 20 years ago, a child who belongs to Brooklyn Quartermain and Dante Falconeri. But the shock doesn't stop with Gio. The truth slices through trust, through promises, through the love that once existed between Camilla and the Cerullo family, especially Lois. Camilla doesn't stop at revealing the truth. She goes further, directly accusing Lois of covering up the past and orchestrating a deception that kept Gio from returning to his birth parents. The confrontation between Camilla and Lois is not just a clash between two women, it's a battle between two maternal philosophies. Camilla believes that 2 decades of love and care give her the true right to motherhood, while Lois argues that silence and secrecy only brought harm. The verbal clash escalates rapidly, spreading beyond personal conflict and drawing in Brooklyn as well. Brooklyn, who had been trying to rebuild a relationship with the son she once lost, now finds herself the target of anger and blame. Though she never knew Gio was nearby and never suspected her loved ones played a role in the deception, she now faces waves of criticism. She's accused of being too distracted by her career to fight for her rights as a mother. But the deepest wound for Brooklyn is not the judgment, it's the cold look in Joe's eyes. Though she loves him deeply since learning the truth, he now sees her as a stranger, perhaps even the cause of his life's biggest tragedy. The situation spirals out of control, affecting not just the family but also their social relationships, where reputations, trust, and individual roles are being severely tested. Camilla, in her desperate effort to protect the child she loves more than life itself, is gradually becoming an adversary not just to Lois, but to the entire Quartermain family. Her resolve makes the situation increasingly volatile, especially as she digs up past secrets and uses everything she knows to assert her definition of Joe's real mother. Lois, dragged into a battle she never wanted, is now forced to defend herself, her credibility, and her position in the Cerullo family. Meanwhile, Brooklyn descends into a chaos she's never known. She can't reach Gio, can't soothe his pain, and can't make anyone understand that she too is a victim of a 20-year deception. Each passing day feels like she's being pushed further away from her son, as if the maternal bond was severed the day she unknowingly signed away her right to him. Now, as everything begins to collapse layer by layer, Brooklyn is left with only one option: to fight for her love, or to accept that she has lost Gio forever. Port Charles has never felt more suffocating. Short conversations, avoiding glances, whispers behind closed doors, all are signs of a family crisis on the verge of explosion. No one knows what will happen next. Will Gio forgive? Will Brooklyn reclaim her son's heart? Or will Camilla never let go and remain the greatest obstacle to any possible reunion? Everything is spinning out of control. Every word, every action is no longer personal, it is now part of a chain reaction in an unfolding catastrophe. And in this landscape, one thing is clear. The shock of Joe's identity has not only shaken a young man's heart, but has ignited a full-blown battle in Port Charles for truth, love, and what it really means to be a family. The increasingly intense demands and control from Camilla are pushing everything far beyond the limits of a normal family reunion. Once celebrated as the adoptive mother who raised Gio with all her love and sacrifice for over 2 decades, Camilla is now transforming into a formidable force, a woman letting her insecurities and possessiveness override reason. She is no longer standing on moral high ground but has taken on the role of an extreme figure, demanding absolute loyalty from Gio. As if the love she once gave him must now be repaid by his complete rejection of his biological parents, Brooklyn and Dante. Camilla isn't merely revealing the truth about Joe's identity. She imposes subtle conditions, weighty expectations, and covertly forces Gio to choose sides. In her eyes, love, nurturing, and years of deep connection are proof that she alone deserves the role of mother in Joe's life. But that also means Brooklyn, the biological mother who once painfully gave up her son under pressure and circumstance, is now seen by Camilla as a threat trying to steal Joe's affection. While Brooklyn enters this emotional journey with fear and regret, Camilla comes in like a warrior, intent on protecting what she sees as hers at any cost. This shift, marked by growing control and possessiveness, is triggering a dangerous chain reaction. Dante, struggling to adjust to his new identity as Joe's father, begins to feel uneasy about Camilla's behavior. Every word, look, and action from her implies that Dante has no place in Joe's life. This puts Dante in a deeply difficult position, torn between not wanting to hurt the woman who raised his son, and not being able to let himself be pushed out of his son's life. From this inner torment, something dark begins to fester within Dante, a suppressed anger. A mounting resistance, not expressed in words, but in emotions, in a decision he will soon be forced to make. Camilla, disguising her anxiety as love, is suffocating Gio. He is no longer someone who gets to choose, but someone who is being forced to make a choice. On one side is the mother who raised him, comforted him, cared for him, and guided his first steps. On the other side are his biological parents, newly arrived but tied to him by an undeniable bond. Yet Camilla's increasingly excessive demands are making everything toxic. She insists that Gio stay away from Brooklyn, warns him of the damage caused by the Quartermain family, and claims that only she knows what's truly best for him. These words are no longer protective, they are psychological control, making Gio begin to feel lost in his own life. Brooklyn, desperately trying to connect with her son, now finds herself a target of criticism and alienation. Rumors in the community, Joe's own doubts, and Camilla's overwhelming presence are driving her to despair. All she can do is wait for a chance, a moment when Gio opens his heart, a second of bravery when he realizes that motherhood doesn't require time, only sincerity. But Camilla does not allow this to happen easily. Every move she makes seems calculated, step by step building a wall between Gio and Brooklyn, rendering all attempts to restore the relationship hopeless. Meanwhile, Dante, usually calm and rational, is beginning to unravel. He can no longer bear being excluded from his son's life. His resistance is no longer silent, it is becoming overt. He confronts Camilla directly, demanding that she stop manipulating his son, but this only worsens the situation. Tensions rise, and his relationship with Gio begins to suffer heavily. Camilla starts to portray Dante as an angry, unstable man, unfit to be a father. She uses everything she can, from his past in law enforcement to his personal failures, to paint a distorted image of him in Joe's mind. A new disaster is now brewing. This is no longer just a story about identity or biological reconnection. It is a battle for influence, an unspoken but fierce war between the biological parents and the once-honored adoptive mother. If no one is willing to step back, if all actions are driven by emotion rather than reason, then the person who will suffer the most will be Gio, caught between three worlds, his biological family, his adoptive family, and his own sense of self. And when the line between love and control is blurred, love can become the most dangerous weapon, pushing everyone into a war no one can win. Port Charles is witnessing the beginning of a new crisis, quiet but persistent, non-violent but destructive, and one can only hope that someone will be clear-headed enough to salvage what's left before everything completely falls apart. Gio is gradually becoming exhausted by the emotional storm surrounding him. The revelations about his identity, the psychological shock from the sudden appearance of his biological mother Brooklyn, his father Dante, and the silent war between all parties involved are tearing his mind apart. For a young man who once lived peacefully, believing he belonged to a simple and loving family, where Camilla was his only mother and the past was uncomplicated, being thrown into the center of lingering tragedies, hidden grudges, and emotionally charged power struggles has become a real nightmare. And it is changing Gio. No longer the calm, sensitive son he once was, Gio is building emotional walls, trying to separate himself from everything. The whispered pleas from Brooklyn, Dante's gestures of connection, even Camilla's fierce protection, none of it brings warmth anymore. Instead, It all makes him feel like a possession being pulled in 3 different directions. There is now a visible weariness in Joe's eyes, a sense of detachment that no one can easily break. The changes within him are not a process of acceptance, but of withdrawal, detachment, and the shutting of emotional doors. Because of this, a major shift is brewing. Gio is seriously considering rejecting all efforts from both Brooke Lynn and the Corinthos family. He no longer wants to be anyone's son. He no longer wants to be defined by blood or the past. To Gio now, the only thing he wants is to live his own life, without apologies, without pitying looks, without awkward embraces filled with guilt. Brooke Lynn's repeated attempts to tell her story, or Dante's insistence that Gio always had a place in his heart, none of it brings comfort. Instead, it feels like Gio is being forced to feel, to forgive, to play a role he never asked for. This rejection is not merely youthful rebellion, it is a strong reaction to the madness encroaching on his life. Camilla's pressure, Lois and Gloria's prolonged silence. Brooke Lynn's sudden reappearance claiming to be mother after 20 years. And Dante speaking of fatherhood when he was never there before. All of it makes Gio feel like just another piece in a long play, where everyone is acting, except him. And while Gio retreats inward, a new wave of trouble begins to rise. His rejection is no longer just personal, it's becoming a symbol of the complete failure to connect past and present. Brooke Lynn, instead of understanding this, grows more afraid of losing her son forever and begins acting impulsively, making emotional choices without realizing that her urgency is pushing Gio further away. Dante, once a pillar of reason, is also starting to show cracks, feeling helpless as he watches his son suffer wounds he didn't cause but is now forced to carry. From here, a new chain of madness begins, with increasingly complex and uncontrollable consequences. Camilla becomes more guarded than ever, launching not just emotional but legal offensives to ensure Gio isn't pulled into a family he doesn't need. Brooke Lynn starts making poor decisions in her attempts to reach Gio, possibly using media or the Quartermain family's fame as tools to prove her worth. Dante falls into an irreconcilable internal conflict, torn between respecting his son's independence and trying to protect a bond that's been absent for too long. All of this is pushing the situation to a new breaking point, where the conflict is no longer a private story but has become a collective emotional disaster. Gio, instead of being loved and cared for, has become a symbol of conflict, of unfulfilled desires, and of truths no one dares to face. And if everyone continues to act out of self-interest, ignoring Joe's real feelings, then he may end up rejecting not only Brooke Lynn and the Corinthos family, but everything. He may choose to leave Port Charles forever, carrying with him a deeply wounded heart and a completely shattered sense of trust. And that would be the greatest tragedy of all. Camilla's increasingly overbearing presence and high-pressure actions are driving Port Charles into an emotional crisis unlike anything the town has ever experienced. At first, Camilla appeared only as a loving adoptive mother, deeply fearful of losing the son she had raised and loved for 20 years. But over time, she no longer remained on the sidelines of the story, she became the epicenter of the chaos, an undercurrent that quickly began to fracture already fragile relationships throughout the town. What Camilla is now unleashing goes far beyond a dispute over maternal rights. It has reached the point of control, manipulation, and widespread emotional destabilization among those who once cared for and trusted her. She is now using every possible justification to keep Joe close, even if it means constantly attacking Brooke Lynn, denying Dante, and rejecting any attempts at reconciliation. She interferes in private conversations, pressures Gio to make a definitive choice between his old family and his blood family, and openly opposes anyone trying to reconnect him with Brooke Lynn. These actions are growing more oppressive by the day, a form of psychological violence that is wearing down not only Gio, but everyone around him. The wary glances and concerned expressions across town are becoming more frequent, as people begin to realize that Camilla is no longer a concerned mother, she has become an obsessive, uncontrollable force. One of the most harrowing recent events, and possibly the tipping point, occurred in the lobby of General Hospital, where Camilla engaged in a heated confrontation with Brooke Lynn. It wasn't just verbal, it was laced with biting sarcasm and humiliation, making the hospital air feel thick and suffocating. Doctors, nurses, and patients alike witnessed the explosive exchange. And from that moment on, Brooke Lynn's reputation and emotional state were thrown into free fall. Camilla didn't just hurt her with words, she stripped Brooke Lynn of her right to be a mother in the eyes of others, repeatedly emphasizing that Brooke Lynn had abandoned her child at birth. That incident wasn't just the climax of their conflict, it was a clear signal that Port Charles could no longer sustain peace as long as Camilla remained present. Faced with an increasingly dangerous situation, Lois, someone who has shared a long history with Camilla and is perhaps the only one with any influence over her, realizes she must step in. Lois knows that if Camilla is allowed to stay at General Hospital, it won't just be Brooke Lynn who suffers. Gio, Dante, and the entire community will be pulled into a spiraling crisis with no end. After several failed warnings, Lois makes a bold but necessary decision. She will remove Camilla from Port Charles, at least temporarily, in order to prevent the looming disaster. However, that decision isn't easy to carry out. Camilla refuses to be removed from the story. She reacts with fierce resistance, accusing Lois and Brooke Lynn of trying to steal Gio from her all over again. She screams, breaks things, and even threatens legal action against anyone who dares to come between her and the maternal bond she has so painstakingly built. Port Charles is once again thrust into a public crisis, this time not only emotional but potentially legal, with implications that ripple through the hospital system, political relationships, media scrutiny, and the reputations of its most powerful families. Brooke Lynn, meanwhile, is pushed to the brink of collapse. She is no longer the confident Quartermaine woman, she is now a mother unraveling, unable to protect her son, losing her public image, and incapable of escaping Camilla's overwhelming shadow. Every effort she makes is dismissed, every hope of closeness with her son is blocked, and watching Lois step in only deepens her pain, highlighting her own helplessness. Dante finds himself in a similar place. He begins to see things with greater clarity. This is no longer just about his family, it's a battle for control. And Camilla has crossed a line that should never have been approached. Lois's intervention is not only about saving Brooke Lynn, it's about saving Gio, who is caught in an increasingly dangerous psychological grip. Dante understands that if something isn't done soon, he could lose his son forever, not biologically, but emotionally. As Joe's perception of love becomes so distorted he can no longer distinguish true affection from obsessive control. Port Charles has never seen anything so chaotic, a foster mother becoming the symbol of division, a community pulled into an unbearable family conflict, and a young man thrust too quickly, too deeply, and too harshly into the eye of the storm. If Lois fails to remove Camilla from the town, what lies ahead will not be just a broken family, but a long, drawn-out crisis that upends the balance and peace Port Charles once held dear. And when madness overrides reason, when love becomes control, then it is feelings, trust, and the human heart itself that will be the first casualties.